We're gonna have a TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight! Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Don't talk about anything else. We don't want to know. We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
And tonight, our favorite show is Disenchantment, brought to you by Matt Groening and the good people at Netflix. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Rattledge, and I had no intention of doing a TV party tonight on this show. But I am a man of the people, the people's champion, if you will, and a request came in from our Canadian office. David Wright, friend of the show, said, hey, how about, I don't know when you're ever going to get around to Lost in Space. You promised it in April. It's now September. But how about Disenchantment instead? And I said, you know what? I think I can manage that. I can squeeze that into the schedule. So here we are at a hot time in the old town tonight. From our Canadian office, David Wright, how do you do, sir?
I'm good, thanks. So since Disenchantment is our favorite show, I assume we're not doing this on the internet.
Okay, I'm giggling, but what are we poking fun at here? What's the gag?
Oh, the general internet fan reaction to Disenchantment being apparently not as good as Golden Age Simpsons, therefore it is a horrible show and not worth paying attention to.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because here's the thing. I watched it. I intended to watch it at some point. I wasn't gonna rush. It was gonna be one of those. If I had time, I would sit and watch it if I wasn't doing other stuff. But you had said that you wanted to talk about it, so I said, okay, that's fine. And my wife and I actually, it was one of those rare series where my wife and I actually could watch it together because we're both fans of The Simpsons. And Bob's Burgers and Family Guy and whatnot. So she was a big fan of Futurama at one point. So I was like, okay, this actually works out pretty well. I didn't know this had any fan backlash. I had no idea what the reception was. So talk to me about that. What exactly is being said about this show?
Oh, well, first thing was I went to watch Movie Bob's review because that popped up. And, I usually like Movie Bob. He tends to, his tastes and mine seem to line up pretty good. So I was kind of just surprised when he just, roasted it.
And what did he say is wrong with it in 50 words or less?
Oh, geez. I have to try and remember that. Basically, everything.
All right.
Not compelling, underdone, no clear direction.
No clear direction? Okay.
Yeah.
So... yeah. So one of the first things I learned about the show is that apparently it does exist in the same world as Futurama. Futurama obviously being several thousand years in the future, this apparently being several thousand years in the past, but both existing on the same plane of reality. And Futurama was an episodic show. It was not. There was no ongoing theme, no ongoing storyline. It was much like The Simpsons. Every episode sort of begins and ends and has no direct connection to anything else. Occasionally they'll reference an elder episode, but for the most part we're not talking The Wire here.
Yeah. Everyone
take a drink. We're not talking serialized television where every episode is sort of a chapter in a larger story. Disenchantment, the first thing that surprised me about it was I initially thought that's where we were going. But as the series starts to take shape after the first 4 or 5 episodes, which takes you about halfway through the season 1, there is a story here. There's definitely a direction as to where it's going. And then for the last 3 episodes, you're on this journey that takes you into season 2. And again, it's part of one long story arc. So this person's crazy if they're thinking that it's sort of directionless.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been months since I watched the review, so I can't remember exactly. But he was pretty harsh, and I was just like, I thought it was fine. Like, I watched it, I laughed. It was a comedy. It did its job.
Yeah, I mean, look, I definitely laughed harder at Family Guy, but I've laughed harder at certain Family Guy gags. Not every episode of Family Guy makes me fall over, breathless from laughter. Though there have been times, there's been certain gags that got me so good that that to this day, every time I see them, I still laugh. They just replayed the one where it's Family Guy throughout the years. So they show Family Guy in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s as a TV show. And Peter says to Lois, "To the moon, Lois." And she's like, "To the moon? What does that mean?" He's like, "To the moon." And he's like, mocks punching her. And she goes, "Let me get this straight. You're going to hit me so hard that I'm going to fly up into the atmosphere and orbit the moon? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Somehow that's supposed to be funny?" And Peter, deadpan, looks at the camera and looks back at her and goes, "Well, it isn't funny anymore." Dude, every time I hear that line, I die laughing.
Maybe it's still funny in Sean Connery's house.
The Birds the Word still makes me laugh every time I see it. But like I said, there are episodes of the Family Guy that I'm just kind of, I don't really get this, but whatever.
I kind of gave up years ago. But I will give Seth MacFarlane this. He's a master at taking old jokes that have died and exhuming them and making them funny again.
Yes. Same thing with The Simpsons. There have been episodes of The Simpsons that have had gags in them that won me over and made me laugh, and some episodes of The Simpsons that were mildly entertaining and nothing more than that. And the reason why I'm doing this whole big preamble is that was sort of my approach to Disenchantment. There were times where I laughed out loud hard. In measurements of laughter, there were no hard belly laughs like I've done with Family Guy, where I couldn't breathe at times. But there were definitely laugh out loud moments, and then there were some things where I was never bored. Yeah, I was never bored with it. I was mildly entertained. I was at least mildly entertained throughout the entire thing, and there were other times where I thought it was kind of poignant what was happening. So give me some of your... I've been talking for a little while now. Give me some of your impressions of the show, your expectations versus what it ended up being.
Well, I think the thing is I didn't have much in the way of expectations, which is probably why I didn't mind it that much. It was just like, oh, Matt Groening's got a new thing. Oh, okay, he's doing medieval fantasy stuff. Okay, looks like it could be good.
What made you want to talk about it tonight?
Well, I think first of all it was just one, I watched all of it, which helps, and a lot of when I sort of started to see a lot of the conversation around it just being, it's not The Simpsons and so on and so forth, and I'm like, maybe someone needs to kind of go to bat for this one.
The "it's not The Simpsons" line kind of gets me, because The Simpsons very much is a commentary on the modern family in suburbia. This wasn't. This told the story of a drunk princess, a psychologically messed up drunk princess, and sort of her quest to redeem herself. And in a lot of ways, the King's quest, Zog or Zag or whatever, his quest to redeem himself as well, as he's done his best but made some mistakes. Yeah, it's two different shows.
Yeah, well, I think it was IGN. They posted the title to their video is Disenchantment the follow up to The Simpsons, and to me that's like saying is Indiana Jones the follow up to Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, they're two different movies.
Same creator, but two completely different things. So I kind of went in there not expecting the next Futurama, the next Simpsons. I was just thinking, it's the next Matt Groening thing.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting The Simpsons. I was expecting more Futurama. And I got something that had a little bit more weight to it than Futurama, but had less to say about humanity, and the nature of man than The Simpsons did. It's kind of in the middle there. But I think it's a little unfair for people to judge it against The Simpsons. First of all, the thing's been on for over 20 years.
Yep.
And as I said, it's just a completely different show. It seems like Matt Groening wanted to do a fantasy show with an overarching story. Kind of, it honestly, this seems to take more from Game of Thrones than it does The Simpsons.
Yeah, actually, that was, I think, one of Movie Bob's main things, is it's aping Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones kind of already apes itself. Like the whole, that particular period of human history was kind of horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So when they have jokes about how many people die in the city of dysentery or whatever, you've already seen that in Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
like it already is commentary on that period of history.
There's plenty of meat on the bone from Game of Thrones for someone to say, hey, I want to do kind of a cartoon funny on this. And I would say that's as good a place as any to start talking about this in earnest, is forget about The Simpsons, forget about Futurama. If you're looking for something that is really the genesis of this cartoon, I would say it's Game of Thrones. That this is just a mocking of the fantasy genre, and the hero's arc. And so you have Abbi Jacobson, who plays Princess Tiabini Mariabini de la Rochambeau Drunkowitz, otherwise known as Bean, who's...
how scary is it that that's not the longest royal title I've ever heard?
And she's your protagonist. And I'll tell you, I talk about this a lot in any TV party or Damn You Hollywood that I do. That is, if your lead is not somebody worth at least cheering on somewhat. I mean, even if you're a Nancy Botwin type, or Piper Chapman, or Vic Mackey type, those people, as horrible as they are, at least are in part worthy of cheering on. You want them to succeed at some point, even though they're terrible. And so that's kind of the first thing I look for in my leads, is being somebody I want to see succeed. And I think the first couple of episodes do a pretty good job of setting up the fact that she's sort of a ne'er-do-well drunk. Yeah. But there's something within her that, if it's nurtured, could really blossom into something really special, and it's worth sticking with her, even though she's kind of a yutz at the very beginning.
Yeah, it's just, instead of expressing her frustrations through song and musical dance, she expresses it through hard drinking and hard partying.
It's also, I think somebody brought this up, that this was a very modern TV show, in the sense that your lead is a woman with a lot of traditionally male characteristics. Yeah.
No, the SJWs, they've ruined another thing.
Typically you would see a male in this role, but they, decided to make it a princess, who can fight people, fights in gets drunk and fights in bars, and doesn't want to be tied down, and wants to go on adventures and all of that. Though you do see the occasional princess that dabbles in that sort of thing as well. What's her face? Yeah. From the
Disney movie.
Specifically, I'm thinking the Disney princess with the red hair and the bow and arrow.
Merida from Brave, I think it is.
Yes, yeah. Merida from Brave comes to mind. So
I was also thinking Jasmine, but yeah, it's a typical princess who doesn't want to be trapped by being a princess. Just instead of just like moping around, oh woe is me, I'll wait for the plot to get going. She just basically goes out and engages in self-destructive behavior.
I think what's very pro-girl about this, and very positive, is that she at no point in the series waits around for anyone to save her. Whether or not the elf show up or the demon, she is doing her thing. And there's an episode a little bit later, about midway through the season, where she says to her dad, maybe I wouldn't be such a drunken putz if you would give me something to do. If if you gave me a role in this, and instead of sort of forcing me to marry people or ignoring me, which seems to be the two ways we go about things.
Yeah, having her start off in a matched marriage or an arranged marriage. There we go. Mm-hmm. That was a genius move because everyone can get on board with not liking that situation. Because I think if they just started her off just being drunk and rowdy and causing trouble, we would have been a bit less sympathetic towards her.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think
she's just a terrible person.
Yeah, I think immediately starting with, she's rejecting the arranged marriage thing, it's like, okay, well, I think everybody can get behind that. And then a little bit later, when he makes her an ambassador, because she's like, I would stop drinking if you would give me a role. Now, here's the thing, and I don't know if this ever got explained. I know that I nodded off here and there on an episode or two. And that's not the series' fault. I've just been really tired.
Yeah.
But did they ever explain who sent the demon and why? And did any of that ever get resolved?
Not really, no.
Okay. Because occasionally they cut to the two people that were standing by the fire, who had some sort of nefarious plot going. And then they stopped cutting to it. It never got addressed, and the demon just became, kind of the devil on the shoulder. But he was part of the group,
Yeah. I think they sort of indicate that they belong to one of those ancient cities that they end up going to find the amulet of immortality or whatever it was called. So, but that's about as close as we've gotten to who they are and why they're doing what they're doing.
Anything else on Bean? I personally like her as a character. I like the fact that they went with the typical Matt Groening look. She's got the overbite and the buck teeth, and she's not. As far as cartoon characters go, she's not terrible to look at. She's a fun character. She's sympathetic. I think she's a strong lead. Anything else about her that you want to talk about?
Well, I would say that she makes her own bad choices at times too. Like, as much as you have Luci there, like the demon, sort of there to try and push her over the edge, still a lot of the things she does is of her own free will, like without him even trying.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, she's got a self-destructive streak running through her, and that's sort of her flaw.
Right. I think the big one is when she screws up being the ambassador in Danksville or whatever it was called. And she didn't need much pushing to get drunk.
Yeah. Well, actually, in that one, she was really trying hard not to get drunk.
Mm-hmm.
But then Luci just sort of, poured some hard liquor into her drink to get her drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was the one time where he was like seriously messing with her.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But what are we gonna do? It's like, let's go try a new type of drug out and see what happens.
Right.
Like, that wasn't Luci up for that. That was all Bean, and and then she kind of realized that maybe making big decisions based off of drug-induced states is not a good idea.
Yes, bliss. If I
that
remember
was
correctly.
it.
Yep. Speaking of bliss, let's talk about Nat Faxon's character, Elfo, an elf from the elf world who moves into the human world. He escapes his home world after his planned hanging. So this, I thought, had to be a knock on the Smurfs. Was my first thought.
Smurfs are a little bit of the Keebler elves.
They had a Keebler elves look to them. But as far as them all singing while they're working, and it's a very simple song, and everyone's happy, and they only have the one girl, and I'm like, this is the Smurfs. And I said that to my wife, actually. I'm like, they're knocking the Smurfs here, and I guess that was a little before her time, so she really couldn't place it. But I was like, no, they're... And it's a weird thing to make fun of, because when was the last time the Smurfs were relevant in modern modern culture? Modern American culture.
I'd say the Smurfs 3, but I think that's giving that movie too much credit.
Yeah, I suppose that there have been recent Smurf movies for kids that maybe resonate with people, but I think I'm thinking of the cartoon from when I was a kid, and no one's heard hide or hair of that for decades now. Not since the 80s. So,
just a couple of Robot Chicken skits,
right? But there it was. It was plain as day for me. And I wasn't quite sure where we were going with all the sex jokes in the beginning. Is this we're doing Fritz the Cat here? What are we doing here? We're on Netflix. Let's show cartoon sex. No, it didn't get that far. But I was a little skeptical in the beginning. In any case, I liked his story. His story was essentially, he had the sort of cognizance to realize that the world was a sham and he couldn't take it anymore, and so he left. I don't belong here. I'm going to go out and seek adventure, and he, comes to know Bean and goes on adventures with her. And
it's like, I'm not happy, but I'm tired of living in a world that tells me I have to be.
But it seems like his story ends pretty much right there. Like, once he's decided that he can't take it anymore and he's going to leave, at that point he's just wisecracks. He's wisecracks and sight gags until the very end of season 1, where he's the reason the amulet won't work. And, because he's sort of an innocent little impish character, when he dies, it's sad. It's definitely one of those heartbreaking moments. When she chooses the mom over him, that was kind of gut-wrenching as well. So I think they did a good job of, even though I didn't think he was important to the plot at all, the show really does revolve more around Bean and, to a lesser degree, her dad. I thought that they made him relatable enough that when he's gone, it hurts you as a viewer.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't call him the deepest character, and he is mostly there as a comic relief character.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing wrong with that. There's comic relief is fine. But yeah, you do feel a bit for him because he is sort of this naive / innocent, relatively character. So he's still trying to figure out the world and how it works. And even if horrible things happen, he tends to respond to them with interest.
Yeah.
As opposed to fear, just because he's never seen this before. He's never seen someone have their heart ripped out in front of him. So he's like, ooh, what's that?
I also think he plays a good angel opposite Lucy's devil.
Yeah. Literal devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think one of the funniest gags to me throughout the entire running gags throughout the series is everyone is calling him a weird looking cat.
Yes. Yeah. I think we'll get to that when we get to Lucy. But I think the line that best summarizes Elfo is, Elfo, I owe you an apology. You are a badass.
Yeah, he's not a milksop either. He has scenes where he's punching, where he's punching Lucy, or he's not a wimpy character. He's not Shaggy. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not a wimp or somebody who's overrun with fear. He's willing to go on these adventures. He's just kind of I'd say he's more of a simpleton, like sort of an angelic simpleton. Like, he's just a good-natured dummy.
Yeah, and again, it's where he's from. Like, he's had a very sheltered upbringing where he hasn't been exposed to such things. So, again, by relation to where he's from, he's pretty tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we can start talking about Lucy too now. I think having Elfo and Lucy as their sort of the representing the angel and the devil characters on her shoulders as she proceeds through different adventures and choices that she has to make, I thought was a good narrative technique. Because because here's the thing: is Bean is a character who is struggling with making the right decision, and now and they could have just not had those characters, but then who'd she talk to and who would she work things out with?
Yeah, it allows her to externalize her moral choices. It's a very Kirk, Spock, and McCoy sort of arrangement, where you, like in the case of Star Trek, you would have Spock explaining what the logical solution or approach to the situation is, McCoy going through the emotional, like just what is right or wrong morally, and then Kirk sort of has to decide between the two what the best course of action is.
Right.
Are you writing this down, Orsi and Kurtzman? This is actually what Star Trek is.
No. Star Trek is riding a motorcycle really, really fast to the sounds of the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, that didn't turn out too good for them. Actually, you think that every time they do motorsports in Star Trek, it's a bad sign. I mean, like, look at Nemesis. They take the dune buggy out, and that was it for the Next Generation films.
All right, so let's move on here. I want to talk about King Zog.
Yeah.
King Zog's an interesting character, and at first blush, you were like, the show's not really about him. But it is, because he's got some stuff going on. And again, at first, you feel, he's sort of written as Bean's foil. He's almost like the representational of the Hollywood dad. He's Homer Simpson, he's Peter Griffin, he's Al Bundy. He's this gruff dad figure who is overbearing and wants to do right by his daughter and is sort of a dummy and and all this other stuff. And then it's like, okay, well, that's not very deep at all, and he's somebody you can root against. And then you realize over the course of the season that he's got some stuff going on. There's more to it than all of that, and he becomes very, he becomes very sympathetic. And when his wife, who's been brought back to life, turns everyone to stone, and you realize he's lost everything. I'm like, that was actually a gut punch, which wouldn't have existed had they just written him as a purely negative character, somebody for Bean to trounce on an ongoing basis. If they wrote him as somewhat sympathetic, somebody you could see his point of view and what he's trying to get done, and and when he realizes he's been betrayed, and he lost his entire kingdom in the process, like, wow, that's actually some fairly strong writing. I mean, like, I can definitely name a few shows that could learn something from that technique.
Yeah, well, they kind of take you up and down with him, because, it starts off typical overbearing father and sort of, nobleman who doesn't really understand people, but it's okay because he can just kill anyone who upsets him. And then, you get to the point where he tricks Bean and company into leading them to the elf village so he can get the blood for the immortality, mixture, which up to this point it's been like he just wants to live forever.
Right.
It's a purely selfish desire. So, you get back there, and he's like, "Oh, Bean, I'm sorry you lost your friend." It's like, it's worse than that. I lost my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the punch. And then they pull the rug right out from under you when he says, like, this wasn't for me. It was for your mom.
Right.
And you start to see him as just this more, there's more going on there. And then, he gives his backstory, and basically he's Robert Baratheon. Just this guy who's really good at killing people, who just, fell in love with the wrong woman, which resulted in him becoming king and just not really knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, I never wanted to be king. I wanted to throw tree trunks and hit people in the head with axes. And I had this bestowed upon me, and I did the best I can while messing it up all, along the way.
Yeah, so you see him as more of just a guy who on a level he means well, he just has no idea how to do it.
Yeah. And I'm really intrigued for what they're going to do with season 2, or the second half of season 1, however you want to interpret it.
Yeah, I think it's part 2 would be what it would be called. Because
they will really set up, at the end, he's lost everything. The entire kingdom is turned to stone. I want to say the one wife left him.
Yeah.
And then the other one has some sort of nefarious plot going on, and she's gone off with Bean somewhere.
Yeah, that's a huge punch, eh? After all that time trying to get her back, just to find out that no, she originally was trying to kill you, and now she's basically destroyed your kingdom and run off with your daughter. That's he's got to be feeling like a bit of a putz.
What kills me about this, and it goes back to the initial thing that we talked about how people are like, oh, this is sort of directionless and everything else. It's like they did what good television should do. Like, and I'm going to say this, and people listening, they're like, wow, what a comparison. Are you on drugs? But this kind of reminds me of Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad took a long time setting up the characters. And just when, and it really doesn't get until the end of season 1. Stuff happens, but it takes a long time to get to the kind of thing the show would be known for. It isn't until like seasons 2 and 3 where a lot more of the criminal element is present, and him trying to hide his nefarious dealings away from his family. That again, that's a lot of season 2 and season 3, and but they gave you a strong base in season 1 by slowly giving you access to these characters and building them up. Because now, like, you're drawn in, right? We just talked about how we're with Bean. We care about her. We want to see what happens to her. We care about Elfo. We want to see what happens to him because apparently he may not be dead for much longer. We care about King Zod. He's lost everything. Is he going to get it back? What's he going to do? Is he going to throw himself out of the high tower? We don't know. But we're interested. And it took a season to get there. Like, they spent time establishing the audience character relationships so that when you take everything away and you knock everybody down, the audience then cares and is excited for a season 2. Instead of resolving everything and not leaving anywhere to go. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. I wish more writers would.
So, The Wire, too, also spends an enormous amount of time building up the characters, and it isn't until the last couple of episodes of season 1 where things sort of shift to where, there's a lot of action taking place. So yeah, strangely enough, this is getting high marks from me. Where I'm comparing it to such heavy hitters as Breaking Bad and The Wire. So good on them for that. As far as other characters go, I don't really have a whole lot to say about them. I mean, the rest of the characters are fine. They do a good job of kind of winking at the audience and saying, and making it look like some characters might not be on the level. Maurice LaMarche, who is also the Brain, by the way, which took me a few episodes to realize where that voice was coming from. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's the Brain. He plays Oddville, the three-eyed prime minister, and I honestly thought that he was in on it. Turns out he's not, But he definitely comes across as somebody who's a little slimy, who might not be working in the king's interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun that you mention all the other characters, because that would be one of sort of my issues with the series is that outside of the core cast, there's not really that many characters to get into.
Yeah.
And, in the show's defense, it's only had, like, 10 episodes. You can only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, a lot of the secondary characters in The Simpsons have been so well fleshed out because they've had the time to do that.
I think the rest of them sort of stand by as gags. You had David Herman, who is the Herald, who has a lot of fun, who screams a lot of funny lines. He also plays Geisbert, who is the one who got stabbed in the head.
Yeah,
he has some.
Yeah, I'm still here.
He's got some pretty funny lines. Billy West as Cesario. Yeah, he's funny at times. Like I said, everybody else just sort of is there for one-liners and gags. And again, you never quite know where anyone stands. Again, very Game of Thrones-ish. But so other than that, what else is on your mind about the the series? You got any thoughts that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, well, I'd say that I would certainly like to see the cast start to expand and them to flesh out some more of the secondary characters and have a bit more interactions with them. Like, one of the interactions I really liked was when Luci started talking to Zod directly. Mm-hmm. He's just like, hey, you gotta take a look at this. Things are not going the way you think they are.
Yeah, it'll be well, he got captured by somebody at the end of the season, so he's still around. He's not Stone, and we'll see. Did he get captured by somebody working in the king's interest? Did he get captured by somebody working against the king? Excuse me.
It is kind of fun how he sounds like Bill Murray, at least to my ears.
Tress MacNeille as Queen Una. That's who I was thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know where she went at the end of the season, so that's also up in the air.
Yeah, I would assume it would be kind of back to her people.
Yeah, we don't know. She heard them sort of plotting against her, but you never see her leave. You know, she just sort of goes off screen, and then
that's one of the pieces in place for when the story picks up again, I imagine.
Yeah,
I know that because I've seen a TV show before. Just like I kind of knew Una wasn't the one turning everyone to stone, because I mean, you know, it was just too obvious.
Right. So, any idea when Bean and her mom board the ship at the very end? Any idea who those people were?
No idea.
Okay, they were not the people that were introduced in the earlier episode where she's on a ship, correct?
No, yeah, I think it's completely different people.
Okay. All right. Like I said,
it's sort of an interesting sort of combination of the sort of like standalone storytelling that we've seen from Simpsons, Futurama, yet also kind of putting in an overarching story, which is more, modern television, which I think worked quite well.
Yeah, I would say that the people who are giving this poor marks or are frustratingly comparing it to The Simpsons are really missing the point of the show and need to go back and kind of watch it again without this insistence that it has to be, Homer and the gang.
Yeah, well, I think they're looking for just something that level of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's a different show, and it's just the first season.
Yeah,
have you gone back to first season Futurama?
I was going to say, have you gone back to first season Game of Thrones? I love the show and everything, but that first season of Game of Thrones takes forever for anything to get going, and it really only hits high gear in the last few episodes.
Yeah, but what a high gear it is.
Yeah,
I would still say that's probably like the most solid season of the show.
It definitely has its moments, but it's very slow. It's a very slow go in the beginning, and I remember. Now, granted, I was going through chemo at the time. It was over the summer of last year, so I was bedridden for a good part of it when I wasn't working, and so that's why I was binge watching Game of Thrones. And I remember
you needed something to cheer yourself up.
Yeah, kind of. Like I'd like to not think about how much pain I'm in. Here, I'll watch this. This seems good.
This looks fun. Oh.
You know what it was is everybody at work at the time was telling me how great it was, and that I was the only one on Earth who wasn't watching it. So I was like, I'll give this a shot, and it did. It definitely distracted me from my woes of life at the time, and but I remember like that the first half of the first season, thinking to myself, I don't know what everyone's making such a big deal about. Nothing's happening. And then again, then it hits that high here. I had the same reaction to Breaking Bad. Where everybody was telling me, you got to watch Breaking Bad. If you love The Wire, you're gonna love Breaking Bad. And I said, I don't know, not enough of what I like in a drug show, probably here.
Yeah, well, my problem is I'm not that big on crime drama.
Oh, see, I mean, I love it, and I've really come to enjoy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Really come to enjoy a lot of the shows that are in that genre. But again, Breaking Bad's another one where I'm like watching the first season. I'm like, well, I'm going to give this till the end, but boy, it's just taking forever to go anywhere. And then it's like you're waiting, and then that green light hits, and you are off and running, and you're like, well, it was definitely worth the wait. So
yeah, that's a tough sell. Like all you have to do is spend 9 hours of your life watching this thing that's not that great, but then it gets really good. Trust me.
Yeah, it's definitely experimental television. It's like look, if you can just wait a while. You know what? Last example of this. You know what started off extremely slow, and like when they pitched it, when I saw the commercials for it, I was like, this is the show. I have been waiting since The Wire for a show like this to come out, and it's Snowfall. And I remember the first half of the season of Snowfall is so boring. Oh my god, I spent every episode by the end of it, I'm just like, get to making crack already. Just stop. I don't care anymore. I don't give a shit about what's happening. Start selling crack.
When are they going to get to the fireworks factory?
Get to crack already. Well, they eventually did, and the show picks up high. So, look, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this is some pretty high comparison here. Disenchantment, Breaking Bad, The Wire, Snowfall, Game of Thrones. It's got good company. So, I can't think of a better way to end it than this. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's kind of drawing a blank here. About one other thing I would criticize is I think that they kind of did the whole Elfo being unrequited romance thing a little too soon.
Yeah, and it went nowhere. And I would say that's my only real criticism of any of the major plot points is he's in love with her for no good reason, and then she does not return his love, and then it's just sort of forgotten about.
Yeah, it should be a bit more of a Fry and Leela sort of thing where it builds over a bit more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I can understand it. Like, you're the first big woman that I've met, and we hang around a lot.
I feel like they knew where they were going to end it. They knew how they were going to begin it. The middle was muddled, and so they're like, well, we'll use up some time by putting together a love story that isn't really earned.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. They haven't quite earned that plot point yet. But I think it's a good start. Like, I think that they have a lot of really interesting places they can take it. I mean, the Hansel and Gretel episode was just fantastic.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Yeah, and just sort of, like the subversion of the whole fantasy tropes thing, I think is really well done. Where you find out that, it's not actually the witch that's the problem, it's the kids, or when they bring in the giant, I forget her name,
Tessa.
Tessa. You find out that she just has something stuck in her throat, which is why she's grunting all the time, and she's actually quite intelligent and articulate.
Right. Yeah. No, it was all good stuff. I enjoy the deconstruction of the fantasy genre. All right.
It's just sort of like a combination of King's Quest meets Discworld. If they can kind of nail that, then I think they've got it.
All right, I think we've talked about this sufficiently. A shorter show, but then again, not as we don't have 8 seasons to discuss here to try to compact into an hour.
It's an episode, so you're done in 5 hours.
So we actually were gonna start to wrap up here, but we can't leave without going to the man who is probably the biggest Simpsons fan I know, outside of maybe Ben Cologne, who used to do some artwork for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, he just ended his show. He just ended the 411 Ground and Pound radio show. He's here to talk about his thoughts on Disenchantment. Ladies and gentlemen, let her rip, Robert Winfrey. What do you got to say for yourself?
Sorry for making you extend this particular show longer. I mean, I know, Mark, you just take any excuse you can to not be around your wife and children. Because being a husband and father is so deeply unfulfilling for you that you hide in a corner of the house and talk about obscure animated shows on Netflix rather than
getting drunk like the rest of us.
I know that you think you're making a joke there, but I can't tell you how many nights my wife has said, "Are you doing a podcast?" And I say yes. She says, "Oh, thank God, I can go to bed now."
You married the right woman.
Indeed. All right, Disenchantment, hit it, buddy.
All right. I don't know what downside of coming in at the end. I don't know what you guys have already talked about necessarily.
We've compared it to Game of Thrones, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Snowfall, and to the people who said that this is a directionless, aimless show, we don't know what show they're watching. We talked about it. It really deconstructs the fantasy genre. It's comparing it to The Simpsons in all but art is really stupid because it's 2 different shows. Even with Futurama, which it has a little bit more in common with, this is a show. This is in the vein of other Netflix type shows where it's one long story told in chapters, as opposed to an episodic, begins and ends in the same 22-minute time period. There's the last 40 minutes of me and him talking.
That's a pretty good summary, though I would like to point out that every program on this show gets compared to The Wire in some form.
Any show Mark's available on.
Hey,
thank you for beating me to that burn, by the way.
Yeah. And also wrestling. There, everyone can take their drinks.
All right. About the comparison to The Simpsons, Yeah, it's stupid. I mean, not a lot of people might remember this because I don't know how many of our listeners were alive and of sufficient brain functionality when Futurama actually debuted on Fox. I was. God help me. And I remember it actually received a lot of the same type of backlash in some respects that Disenchantment received, in that it's not The Simpsons. No, it's its own thing. Comparing it to something else because a few people are associated with it is a bad habit that we've all developed because of largely just prepackaged network television. Or, a singular creative person who is only capable of one thing. Or a creative person who's capable of multiple things, but, hey, this was successful. All we want you to do is recreate that. Wasn't the case for Futurama. It wasn't just The Simpsons in space. It's not the case for this, which is not The Simpsons in the past. It's not Futurama in the past. It is its own thing, and it should be taken as such. That being said, you can still see certain art, not just art. When I say artistic, I don't just mean in the art style. I mean in the comedic sensibilities, in elements of delivery, there are similarities, but it's also very much its own thing. I hadn't thought about it as a complete deconstruction of kind of the fantasy genre, but I think it works on that level. I enjoyed it as kind of a twisted morality play, where you had a take on the character with a literal devil on one shoulder and elf on the other.
We talked about that.
And I enjoyed it as a twisted morality tale, because I think it works on that level, despite the main character becoming profoundly obnoxious to the point of unlikability somewhere around episode 4 or 5. Just, it got, her existence became annoying at that point rather than compelling.
Well, let me jump in here, because we talked about how she's a character that you do want to root for. She does derive a bit of sympathy. And, when things sort of fall apart at the end for her and for her dad, there's a lot of gut punches in those last couple of episodes, especially at the very end. Did you ever, now you're saying that midway through the season she becomes terribly unlikable. Did that turn around for you at any point towards the last maybe 2 or 3 episodes? Okay. Or were you at the end just like, nope, burn in hell, bitch?
No, those last 3 episodes, I think, 8, 9, and 10, are what really are what you kind of expect in terms of actual overall quality from the people involved with this show. Sure, there's some, and I mean, there's a lot of parts in the beginning where you are rooting for Tia Beanie, in part because you think her father's kind of a jackass. And then she just becomes, for me at least, there's a significant period of time when she's just so self-destructive that it's like, okay, you know what? You deserve all this terrible stuff.
Right.
Like, you can't actually get out of your own way. I am no longer going to feel sympathy when you plow into a tree head first.
In her defense, she is a teenager.
I'm aware, and I hate teenagers. For largely that same reason.
That's a losing argument.
That's accurate.
That's a losing argument with this one, Dave.
I mean, and in fairness, I give credit to them for accurately portraying those issues. I don't mean to say that it's poorly written. Simply that this is not a character that, beyond a certain point, engenders sympathy. Then you get towards the end when they do a few things that actually, in a really kind of brilliant way, upend what they've done in the previous, 7 episodes. First, they actually give Zog some depth. Because the entire time we've been experiencing him as a character, it's from the perspective of his rebellious teenage daughter, and very few teenage daughters think well of their fathers.
Right.
Mark, that's a look into your future.
Oh, I don't want to get too much off on a tangent here, but I got to experience my cousin's daughter this past week, and the experience was mostly her yelling at her mother for no good reason, and me turning to my wife going, "Is this the future?" And they all resoundingly said yes, and I thought seriously about walking into traffic.
Yep.
I just remember that picture of the Slash and his daughter, where he's on the red carpet doing the devil horn thing, sticking his tongue out, and she's just got that "you are just the lamest dad ever" look on her face. And then I just realized that no matter what I do, no matter how cool of a badass I am, my 14-year-old daughter will always think I am horrible, and there's just nothing that can be done.
We were at lunch today, and I was just, I was being silly, and I was kind of elbowing my daughter, and I was singing a song at her. There was someone had remixed part of a Clutch song into something else, so I was doing the refrain from that remix. I think it's like I've been doing it like this since way, way back. And so I kept saying that, and then I would kind of elbow her a little bit, and she looked like she was ready to kill herself.
To be fair, the same thing happens with Robert, so...
Well, I nudge him for different reasons.
Hey, Robert already went through his period of extreme suicidality related to my teenage years. Mark can't push me back there.
Well, congratulations on making it through, man.
Can we go through one of these shows where you don't talk about how you wanted to kill yourself? I mean, I love you, man, but Jesus Christ.
Quit making it easy to bring up.
Yeah, that's what you bring out in him.
Welcome to Damn You Hollywood. Have I mentioned I want to kill myself lately? Go ahead.
I have never opened the show that way, though now I have to at least once.
Welcome to Damn You Hollywood. I'm still alive. Mark
hasn't driven me over the cliff yet.
We're still here. And, I mean, you joke about that being a victory, but it is in some respects. Anyway, back
good on you, man.
to what I was saying. Again, they gave Zog an actual bit of character depth where you see he's actually still not properly having dealt with the loss of his first wife. And those last couple of episodes, I mean, specifically like the end of 8, I believe, when he goes on, at the monument to his wife and Tia Beanie's mother, who turns out to actually be her mother. That's the end of 9, not 8. And you get suddenly the whole series becomes this really interesting study on the inability to actually grieve and what loss like that can do and drive people to. And there's still humor, but it's one of those shows that you almost have to watch a second time because there's so much that takes place from a character perspective over those first 7 to 8 episodes that is illuminated by the stuff that takes place in 9 and 10. There's stuff with Elfo that makes more sense once you realize elements of who he is as a character. Certainly stuff with Zog and the princess that makes more sense. And that's a hallmark of a well-written show. And then they end it with our heroes being scattered to various locations. I just gotta say, in all honesty, I was really surprised when they actually killed Elfo.
For now.
I mean, we all know he's coming back, but still, to actually have that go for a couple of episodes.
He is dead as T'Challa.
He is the Jon Snow of Disenchantment.
Yeah, that's a more accurate.
Well, he does know nothing.
Also true. I got a few laughs out of the show along the way. There's some great one-liners. There's some good situational comedy. I mean, I think my favorite line from this show, the one that made me laugh the most, is right near the end when Zog turns to his court sorcerer and says, I never should have let you glue those stars on your dunce cap.
That was a good one. It's like, wow, I'm a great butcher. This is a pet shop.
That's a good one. Give me 10 cc's of brick. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of good stuff there. If you go into this expecting The Simpsons or Futurama, you're going to be disappointed because it's not. It's neither of those things. Don't treat it as such. Treat it as its own entity. And again, I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to season 2, wherein we realize that Tia Beanie's mother is a horrible demon monster of some variety.
This really is life from the perspective of a teenage girl, isn't it?
Yep. In a lot of respects, yes it is. It's a morality play about a teenager who hates both of her parents. One who's actually trying, but she really hates for sticking around. A stepmom who she can't relate to at all and feels like an alien. And the returning mother figure who's a horrible monster of some variety. Yeah. This is just a teenager's life.
Yeah, and she's trying to control her life.
And I just want to get drunk.
Yeah.
All right. I know I wanted to get you on here because you're a huge fan. Yeah, we talked in the very beginning, and you alluded to it, that the show's gotten some controversy because of the fact that people are like, oh, it's not The Simpsons, and you addressed it to a degree, but is there anything related to that you just, because I know that we have a thing where we attack the critics all the time, so I just kind of want to make sure there isn't you've sufficiently said what you need to say to the people out there who are saying the show isn't good because it's not as good as The Simpsons or it's not like The Simpsons.
I mean, I wish I could remember the post that our friend Benjamin made about this, because he had a quote about this that I thought summed it up perfectly.
Here, I'll go on his Facebook page, see if I can find something.
Because it's something to the effect of, so you're complaining that a new show isn't the same as an old show whose creative peak is still a subject of contestation loosely within a 5 to 6 season window, whose success is largely attributed to a unique blend of the people involved in the moment in time at which it was conceived. Yeah, it's not a valid criticism. It really isn't. I mean, I'm struggling in some respects to come. It's like if I honestly think this is part of the reason, much as I don't enjoy him as a comedian. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld didn't do much after Seinfeld, in large part because he would have received the same criticism. Well, this isn't Seinfeld. Larry David struggled until he made himself a giant buffoon that morons flock to.
Here's what he posted. I haven't had a chance to see Disenchantment on Netflix yet, but this seems to have been the reaction from a certain subsection of Simpsons fans. Why isn't this show exactly like another show I like that had its best episodes within a very narrow and still disputed 8 to 10 year period of time that owed its quality and success to a myriad of combination of incredibly specific factors, including but not limited to its innovation, complex writing, characters, animation style, humor, and cultural significance, the impact of all of which can in large part be attributed to the specific era in time in which I was first exposed to it.
Yep.
You're pretty darn close there, Robert.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially my thought on the comparative and on the comparisons there. It's a stupid comparison. It's roughly akin to... I struggle with a creative standpoint, but it's like watching a... Oh, jeez. It would be like watching, Okay, here's what it is. It's like watching Happy Feet and going, why didn't George Miller make another Mad Max movie?
You have to admit, Happy Feet with a Mad Max storyline would have been a pretty awesome movie.
And look, Happy Feet's fine apart from the gross and disgusting symbolism at the end. I mean, it's... and the hackneyed, political commentary, but different creators have different processes. There are people who complain that, Fury Road wasn't, the original Mad Max or, the Road Warrior as such. Like, it's never going to be exactly the same. Take it for what it is, not for what you wish it was. Good and bad.
All right, I don't think there's any better way to end the show than with that line. That was very well done, and we're at an hour. So, with that being said, David, thank you for asking me to do this show, give me a chance to talk about it. It prompted me to watch it sooner than I might have, and I'm better off for it. So, again, thank you for that. Why don't you go ahead and do any plugs you've got? I don't know if you're going to be on any podcasts or anything, or you've got something you want people to be hip to. So now's the time.
Okay, well, I'm not sure about me being on any other podcasts. I mean, we still have to do that Lost in Space at some point.
Yeah, that's probably never going to happen at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to hold my breath. If you're up for Star Trek Discovery sometime, oh boy, can I talk about that one.
I don't have access to it. I'm not paying for CBS, and I don't know where else to watch it.
Yeah, well, that's
Mark,
one...
you have the internet.
If I can find it, look, I would love to talk about it if I can find a way to watch it. I'll tell you. I'll say that. Okay.
I'm not going to say anything that could be used against me in the court of law at a later date. So, even though we spent the beginning of this podcast lambasting him, I still do quite highly recommend Movie Bob as a film critic. He's got a good perspective on things and some interesting things to say. Can't say I agree with everything he says, but
he was wrong
usually a pretty reliable choice.
Yes, he was wrong about this, but whatever else he's right about, he was wrong about this.
Okay, and as usual, good shout out to your friend and mine, Andrew Graham.
All right, Robert, you just did a show. What show was that?
I did. That was the 411 Ground and Pound radio show where we previewed UFC 228, which will be a... God, that card. There's a few decent fights there, but there's 14 fights scheduled for the card. And you're main eventing with Tyron Woodley. I mean, are you trying to kill your audience with boredom? Are you just... I have to imagine this is the goal. The goal is to have some poor young fellow come into this event for the first prelim, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, walk out a gray-bearded old man ready to go into hospice because the event has lasted that long. So you can listen to Jeff Harris and I preview the event and talk about some news from around the world of MMA, and at the end, because there's always something random, have a very brief discussion about my hatred of Thor Ragnarok.
I don't even... You know what? I don't want to know. All right, this week...
Of course you don't. No one does. That's why the show does such bad numbers.
This week on the Rattleton Broadcasting Network, tomorrow night being Labor Day, we've got a source material for the initial 9-issue run for Dark Horse's Barbed Wire. On Tuesday, we'll have an on-trial for the award-winning feature featuring Pam Anderson Lee, Barbed Wire. And then on Wednesday, provided I don't get another letter from a record company saying tear it down, tear it down, tear it down before we sue you, we'll be reviewing Gravity from Bullet for My Valentine. On the way to our review of...
Wait. Who bitched about you guys
I got
reviewing?
I got a letter for... This is why the Alice in Chains show got taken down. I got a letter from... let me see if I can find it real quick. I got a letter from somebody that... They actually found it through my Twitter thing, but... in response to, the following material has been removed from your account in response to the DMCA takedown notice copied at the bottom of this thing. So it was in reference to the Alice in Chains Metal Hammer of Doom, and it's basically from... Yeah, I am contacting you on behalf of the International Federation of Phonographic Industry and the record company it represents. The IFPI is a trade association that represents around 1,300 major and independent record companies in the U.S. who internationally who create, manufacture, and distribute sound recordings. Blah blah blah. Take down your Alice in Chains review.
You know, I bet if you'd had glowing things to say about it, they would have let you keep it.
You know, that's what I said, but Jessica... I was convinced that, like, the only reason why they said take it down was because I shat all over that record, like I had diarrhea. So, join us this week while I say glowing things about the new Bullet for My Valentine. No, I honestly think it's because, like, they're on Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers is very protective of their IP. Most of the stuff we do isn't really major label stuff. It's a lot of indie label, and we did the new Cruacon, and those not only did they know about it, but they were like, "Thanks for the review, guys," and like tweeted it out to their followers. So there you go. Anyway, so we'll have some Metal Hammer of Doom extras that are up. Definitely check out our review of the Temper video. It's awesome. Next week, on the Metal Hammer of on the Rattleton Broadcasting Network, we will have source material for Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles. We'll finally have our TV party tonight for Cloak and Dagger, and then the main event of the year, we finally get around to Clutch, the Book of Bad Decisions. And if Sean and his gaggle of girlfriends are available, we will be reviewing Insatiable Season 1, because it, too, caught a bit of controversy out there among Netflix viewers. And so we'll address that as well. If you're looking for stuff in the archives, well, you won't find Alice in Chains, but you will find a pair of shows for Legion. And, I should probably talk about this. I watched a wrestling show. Take a drink.
That was a mistake, Mark.
I actually bought and paid for All In, brought to you by the good people at Ring of Honor and Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks and New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then afterwards, Pat and I shit all over it.
Look, man, if it wasn't for Pentagon, that whole show would have been crap.
No, Pat and I spent an hour talking about the show, the good, the bad, and the ugly of All In. So that's up in the archives. Give it a listen. The sound's a little off in the beginning, but give it a chance. My computer finally settles down and you stop hearing clicking sounds. So that's it. That's all the news that's fit to print right now, and all the shows that are up or going to be up in the near future. Again, thank you, David. Thank you, Robert, for jumping onto this show after finishing your show. We'll see you soon. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Hail before Zog.
Hail before Zod.
I've been waiting all episode to say that. It's been ruined. Now, isn't that just the perfect place?